Okay. Hey, everyone. So presenting today on medication resources, and we're going to talk through medication resources in R1. I apologize. There's kind of a merging issue with the slides, so I might have to skip a few and get through it. Basically, what we'll cover today during this part of the TDG is the summary of the profiles that are currently in AU Core R1. So those are our AU Core medication profile, our AU Core medication request profile, and our AU Core medication statement, and look at what those resources actually are and summarize some of the other conversations on Zulip and other channels. And then we will take a look at medications in other guides, so including AUCDI, US Core, IPA, etc. And then open the meeting to discussion around our usage of these resources in R1, and then talk about next steps of how we get to our official place. All right, so the three resources in AU Core R1 are the medication, medication request, and medication statement. And we wanted to just summarize really quick what the differences at a resource level are between these. The narratives on the screen are from the base FHIR R4 implementation guide. And what it is effectively describing is that a medication request resource is more focused on the order of a medication for a subject, while the medication statement resource is used to record medications or substances that a patient reports as being taken, not taken, or have taken in the past. So at a lower level, the base level is, this is the differences between those two. And there is a large Zulip discussion on, is it a bit better over here? There was a larger Zulip discussion on what this actually means, what the intent is behind that. And to broadly summarize, one of the things we look at is a medication request, again, represents more what a patient should be taking, is a request order, is what the intent is, while the statement is more a recording of this is what the patient said they were taking at this point in time. Additionally, there are some boundaries defined in the implementation guides. You are more than welcome to look that kind of differentiate between the medication resources for not only request and statement, but then the associated ones of administration and dispense. Are there kind of any questions on that summary between the resources? And Heath and some of the people who participated in the Zulip, if you want to chime in, happy to also get your quick thoughts.
Can I just jump in? Just looking at the R5 definitions, which I know is different slightly, but medication statement, as I understand it, isn't just what the patient reports, but it is what is reported as the patient having taken, which I think is an important distinction.
Yeah. I did add a slide of just future considerations because we do need to think about how our AU Core IG will move to R5.
Yeah.
So yes, that is a
my background experience also that's the normal way that it's being executed in context of,
yeah.
I'm not saying universally.
Okay, great.
I will take that one step further and just say the way that R4 has been used, and in particular its status element, has been around the currency of the medication, which has changed significantly to what has been suggested in R5, which is now about the status of the reporting or the recording of the medication statement. And that is part of the considerations that we need to think of, because AU Core will actually be using an R4 version of the medication statement. But we need to be thinking about how we are future-proofing AU core as we move towards R5 in the future. One final thing is that there is an adherence section in the R5 resource that actually does record that currency aspect. That was removed from the status intent in R4. So the capability to record currency is still there in R5. It's just that it has significantly changed the way the medication statement has been used in R4 versus R5.
The other piece of this to cover in summary is the medication use statement is the data concept that is presented in the AUCDI, and I'll open that in a second. We'll look at the US core guidance on the FHIR medication resources and the considerations with the IPA and IPS. Let me just open the AUCDI PDF really quick. The medication use statement in AUCDI is an assertion about the current use of a single medication by an individual. So as we are discussing how we are going to use medication request and medication statement in AU Core R1 implementation guide, we need to be thinking back about how to support the definition of a medication use statement in AUCDI. So again, that's an assertion about the current use of a single medication by an individual. I encourage everyone, if you haven't already looked at the AUCDI, to give it a review. It includes some use cases and the concepts elements. So that part of this data concept includes a medication name, form, strength, route, dose, and then a clinical indication, a last administration, an endpoint, and a comment. So as we do our discussion, we do need to think about, do we support this AUCDI element? How do we support it in the IG? Where do we differ, overlap, etc.? And how does it fit back? Yes?
Under last administration, is that meant to be last given to the patient or last script? Because in primary care, there is no administration.
Yeah, I think the intent of the medication use statement is when is the last known instant that the patient was taking that medication. So it's not script, it's what is the last known point at which the patient had that drug in their body.
So there's an element of assumption that a script is given to the patient, that the patient therefore takes it.
I think that is actually a topic of conversation.
From a primary care perspective, most of the primary care systems have nothing other than script. There is no visibility of any dispense, patient consumption.
Understood. And that is a discussion point of what do our systems currently support when discussing which resource we should use.
Thanks.
Anybody comment on this conversation I've had with Heather? It was very explicit that the clinicians wanted master administration. So they wanted master administration, that the script was not what they wanted.
Yeah, it was intended not to. It wasn't intended to be the last administration date.
The intent of this element is the last known.
Recording in progress. Heather is on the line as well, but she's just having trouble hearing anyone besides to go in, so she can hear your voice even of the words. So I'm not sure how we can. Anyone like you, mate? Can you hear Danielle?
Danielle is going to say something really quick. If you can hear Danielle, please raise your hand on the line.
Can anyone hear me or not? How about now? Can people online hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Still cannot hear.
Still can't hear anything. What about now? Let's maybe give up the ghost on this one.
Yeah.
And we'll, if they can hear you.
Yeah, I'll try to summarize what is said in the room to the group.
Thumbs up? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, I can hear. Just need to double check. I mean, I can hear Marvin. No. Yes. Yes. No. Let's go with no. Let's just.
I'll repeat statements and questions from the room.
Okay.
The overall.
There's a chat to say they cannot hear anything.
Now
Yeah,
it's
we can
worse.
see that.
David, can you hear me? Can you say yes or no whether or not you can hear Andrew? Yeah.
I can hang up. Well, I don't know what happens if I hang up in the phone. If I hang to she. I don't know how to hang up. It's not mine. I press mute and then off. Mute. So I put it into sleep and it did go to sleep. Maybe just use it back. Okay. Is that better or worse?
All right, how about now? Can you hear me? And it's relatively clear, David.
We'll take that back for testing.
Okay. So to summarize, the last administration point was that we will be discussing kind of last prescription or what systems have the intent of the last administration. AUCDI was the last known instance that a patient has had this drug.
There was another element there that, if you can scroll down a little bit, I just thought was worthy of notice as well.
It's going to take a while, so.
Just the information models will be.
This guy.
Endpoint. Does everyone understand what is meant by endpoint? That's the intended end of this medication. So it is probably worth coming to the definition.
Yeah. So what Heath is getting at is the endpoint is the intended absolute end date for the use of the medication. So
if it's antibiotics, for example, you know it's certain that course. So that's the endpoint. The name class.
Just going back to the
this is going to
last illustrations. We're not just talking here GP.
correct. This is, and what we'll get to the discussion point is this is all of our, in the AU core aspect, is this is all of our systems. How do we represent this data? How do we interoperate this data? Here's what the clinical guidance was of having a use statement that has these elements to it or these concepts as part of it. How are we going to actually exchange that and represent that? So
this is like two examples of where last administration would be or say a 3 research
patient is emerging, they may their last dose medication, or discharge summary, care summary, knowing that administration.
Yeah. So knowing that last point in time, or being able to represent that. The U.S. core portion of what they have in their implementation guide, I added a link, but to summarize is they use the MedicationRequest resource to represent that for exchange, and do not use the statement at all. So US core only has request, and they use that to represent the different portions without a profile on medication statement. And then the IPA and IPS, we wanted to call out that the IPA does have a client ability that you must be able to query for both the medication request and the medication statement. So if your system is going to be implementing AU core and also implementing IPA, if you are consuming either, you have to be able to consume both. So just as an important kind of aside to keep in mind.
And IPS does both?
IPS does both, but I don't think it has a preference on which one to use.
Can I just ask a question? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll wander around with my phone. If you want to talk, I'll run with my phone, and then you can ask your question, and hopefully it'll come through. Can those online hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going to be trying to do on this call is I've brought the next steps forward so we can keep in mind what we're trying to get to is what are medications going to look like in R1. So come August when AU Core R1 is released, what are the profiles that we will have? What are the requirements on those that we will have? What are the mandatory elements, the must supports? How have we tested this in our connectathons, et cetera? So those are all going to be action items that are driven out of our discussions and follow-ups either we resolve today or in future meetings. And we will need owners and individuals who can take these follow-ups and help work on these action items. So the more people we have involved and the more engagement we have from everyone, both in the room and on the call, the quicker we'll be able to get through these resources and have a more clear R1 release. Okay, so I wanted to kind of open the floor for discussion on the medication request and medication statements in AU Core R1. I've added prompts here that are really more indicative of types of things we should be looking at. They are not meant as a exhaustive list for any specific points, but just as a starting point for the discussion. So one of the things that I think we kind of alluded to earlier is what do our systems, whether those are primary care systems, hospital systems, other dispensing systems, et cetera, currently support? What are the ideas, concepts, models they have? Do you support either resource? Do you either support the medication request or medication statement today? What are the use cases that we are looking for to do both in R1 and in the future? How do you represent medications in your system? Are there any considerations there? And then what in R1, what are we saying is the information we want to exchange and the interoperability we want to achieve through that? Yes.
Hi, sorry, Sanjeev from MedicationRequest. We have medications request, but not statement. What fundamental differences are there between them, and what are we going to be focusing on if there are decent differences between them? Will it be statement or request for R1?
That's partly the conversation we need to have is what resource are we going to be able to put in R1 and have different implementations already be able to support to move interoperability forward? What things do we need to put in R2 or future versions to better support alignment with what the AUCDI is looking for? And I believe there was some talking with Brett, some clarifications we needed from the CDG that we'll bring back to them of, Are these clinical requirements that you want to represent the medications this way in systems? Is this needed for interoperability and exchange, et cetera? So really, I think the fact that you have request or statement is a indication of, hey, this is what your system has today. This is what we would be able to do in R1 and what we are looking to discuss further today. We have a raised hand, and Michael, why don't you go first?
Yeah. I really dislike that first opening statement about request or statement, because it's talking about how do you represent things, not what are you trying to say. And really what we should be starting with is, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say this is a prescription or this is a use? And then how should we represent that when we exchange it? And if systems are currently representing things differently, then they may need to change.
Yep, I understand and agree that, yes, we need to say, what are we trying to exchange? Are we trying to exchange if my system's connecting to your system, are we trying to exchange I saw this patient at this point in time and they said they were taking this? Or should I be saying to you, you know what, this patient has this prescription, you need to reconcile that with them when you see them. Heather, I believe you had your hand raised on the line.
Afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
No, they'll come through, won't they?
No.
Because I just muted it.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. Afternoon, everybody. In relation to AUCDI, we definitely didn't want to encroach on the world of prescriptions and medication ordering. The use case that we were focused on very much was the patient summary, which is effectively a statement around the medication as a report or a snapshot of what is currently being taken. And at the moment, we've got a couple of those additional data elements that I think I heard you. The audio hasn't been easy to follow what your previous discussion is, so apologies if there's some conflict or overlap, but the endpoint and the last administration were the kinds of things that clinicians thought were useful to transfer to the next destination of care or the next clinician that might be, receiving this whole GP to GP record or whatever it might be. But I think we'll see that grow potentially, and certainly the experience overseas is to think things like, when was the last prescription issued and what was the authority reason, things like that are around the administrative things that will make the next or the receiver of that information be able to prescribe easily. So it's administrative stuff, but not at a per prescription level. It's like an overview. So it's this kind of hybrid model. And while the medication request and medication statement have some common data elements, because you should be able to, I guess, effectively derive the statement from existing prescriptions in systems. I mean, I guess that's the way I imagine it working, and vice versa. It's not trying to replicate the prescriptions, but to give this, what is the information we need to share and what will make it clinically safe so that the clinician on the other end of this, whatever this document, message, whatever it summary might be, can actually just take that care and run with it and not have to worry about all these kinds of things. So discharge summaries, did the patient end up being given the medication? Were they prescribed it at the hospital pharmacy, or does the GP have to do it? It's going to start to come into some of those kinds of things, I think, in future discussions. So just don't think that it's just this simple. I think there will be a whole lot of data elements, messy data elements that are report-like or snapshot-like rather than prescribing, that will need to be exchanged in patient summaries in the future. I just wanted to frame that, I guess, as you have more of this discussion. Is that helpful?
I don't have them written down. Thank you, Heather. We have Keith.
Just a question back to you, Heather.
There, go ahead. I muted you. You can speak.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
You should be able to.
I can't hear myself out. Strange. So in the case, you talked about deriving a statement from a prescription. Yet we've got those couple of extra elements that aren't captured as part of a prescription, the administration in particular. So I just wonder how we expect to fulfill that requirement for a system that only has a list of prescriptions.
Okay, so we're going to have Danielle comment on that. And then for the folks on the lines, I mute the speakers, so please raise your hands so that I know to unmute the speaker so we can all hear you. And when you raise your hand, we'll call on you and deal with all that. Thanks.
Okay, so Danielle here. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm going to try and restrict them to being sort of meaningful to the topic we're talking about. And I feel like this is a little bit of an R2, R1 storm in a teacup, right? We will absolutely be supporting medication orders. We will also be supporting medication summary statements. And some systems will have one, some systems will have both. And so I feel like we need to understand that. I almost feel like we're being asked to go, which one is more important than the other? And that's not really AUCOR's business. We need to define how you can ask for each of those things and what you get back. And maybe we can only fit one of those in R1, but the next one will be definitely in R2. So I feel like we can almost sidestep some of the argument we're having that's unproductive if people are, and I'm happy to take objections on that, to go, yes, some systems will only have medication order information, and we would only expect them to provide medication order information then, because that's all they have. And some systems would have medication use information, and we would expect to be able to ask them for it and to get that back, and AUCOR needs to cover it. Is there any objection to kind of those points? Oh, we've got one at the back. Okay, no objections. A comment.
Can I put a caveat on an objection? As long as it's well defined when to use one or the other.
So I guess the question in the room is maybe we should be thinking about when we choose one over the other. Another comment.
Yes.
Sorry, what will be the guidance from CDG?
As to which one you use when?
Yeah, will the CDG prefer medication statement? Then shouldn't be focusing on that in TDG.
I mean, I think
AUCDI. Okay, AUCDI. What does AUCDI mention? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So based on that, don't we know the guidance already based on that? Based on AUCDI?
So that's their priority, and they've given it to us. We're now discussing, is that our priority? Can we do that? Or maybe our response is we have to come back to the TDG. Sorry for talking over this. That we actually think it's more crucial for some reasons to actually address the medication request, because that could be our decision. I think that's kind of what we're talking about now.
so. For those on the line, to kind of quickly summarize what Danielle said is, yes, we understand the use cases and what AUCDI or the CDG has as guidance, but we also need to say from a technical design group, what are we able to do? What are we able to accomplish now in R1? Are people able to support medication statements? Are people able to support medication requests? What's going to get us some level of interoperability as opposed to the perfect level?
Yeah, Daniel Folks here. So just wanting to basically agree, it's not an either or issue from my perspective. I think if you look at the intended use back even in R4 as well as in R5, the request is part of your workflow process. And so we're going to need some request process around the workflow of prescribing. Whether it's done in hospital or whether it's done in primary care, it's the same. The statement, I believe, is absolutely important in primary care context as well as in hospital context. In fact, possibly more important because visibility needs to be there. I'm working on a just to give a use case scenario on a health information exchange concept for Northern Queensland. So here we have, typically in rural and remote, we can have up to 5 different prescribers prescribing medication without any visibility of anybody else. That is huge clinical risk. So for me, I have an agenda, but I would vote priority for the statement. But I totally agree that it's not an either or issue, and I would totally go with the consensus on whether request is better than nothing at all.
Because I did have a comment on the loaded question.
What
The
loaded?
loaded statement. But can you repeat the loaded statement so I can repeat it for the people on the line? Because I'm not sure they caught the loaded question online. Oh, okay.
Okay, can you paraphrase Heath's loaded question, Danielle?
Well, I think Heath, your loaded statement was on me saying some systems will have one, some systems will have the other. When we get to in AUCDI, we're going to support both. We are going to have a definition of how a medication order is working. How do medication use statements work? I think one of the questions that came in is from the loaded statement from you, Heath, is we need to clearly define when to use one or the other. And my comment back on that was going to say, I think we sort of can, because AUCDI is not prescriptive in that sense. What we're saying is what our requirement is here are the profiles for that. If your system wants to access this information, here's how you can ask for it, here's how you get it back. The AUCDI has a set of clinically written kind of recommendations on when to use things. AUCDI can say in there, if you're looking for orders, you need to be using a medication request resource, for example. But there's nothing in there that's going to prevent people from doing something silly or maybe a misuse. We could put some guidance around it, and I'm very amenable to that. I think that's a good idea to say these kinds of clinical concepts are best supported by this particular resource choice. But I think that's about as far as we go.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got Andrew to put up the actual use cases from AUCDI. It goes back to Steph's question earlier, what is our scope? And these use cases, I think, are really useful to define that. Also comes back to Michael around coming back to our requirements, basically. So if we're using AUCDI as our guide, and this is the one that they've obviously prioritized, then that's kind of our use case, and we need to find a technical solution to this use case. And that almost becomes our guidance for a core to say, this is how we see it being implemented.
This goes back to conversations I think we've had separately too. Of AUCDI says a current medication list. I think it's a question for all the vendors and implementers in the room of, when you have a current medication list in your system, are you building that off of requests? And when you go to exchange that, do you want to exchange an actual statement such that you are assuming and accepting all that information from the other system? Or do you want to exchange the initial request and then it is up to you to reconcile that information into your system? Because there is a sense of, as you are exchanging this data, you become responsible for your instance of that patient's medication list and what data you're maintaining that off of, what you are currently supporting in your system. So yes, you can build your medication list and record these clinical data elements, but I think there is a question of, when you actually go to exchange, do you require additional review and like a interview with the patient to understand how does your medication list represent that?
So I'm going to comment on that, and then I know, Michael, you've had your hand up, so I'll hand over to you. To be honest, I literally don't think we should go that far in AUCDI. I think we need to define how to do medication statements and medication requests, and exactly in the scenarios you were talking about, Andrew. If a client system has reasons to build that off both requests and statements, they can query for it, get it back, or go and find a system and go, what do you have? If you've only got statements, give me that. If you've got both, give me that. I'm going to use my own back-end processes to remove duplicates or those kinds of things. Let's not be too careful. And now I can hand it over to Michael. We're not actually solving how to do medication lists. That's not what we're doing. It's discrete components that systems can then pick up how to do that based on other meaningful business logic. That's downstream IGs. But anyway.
Perhaps. So, so maybe I can articulate why I'm coming from the position I'm coming from and where some of this discussion is sort of grating slightly the wrong ways, because a lot of the discussion is very server-centric. It's about what do I serve up? What do I want to exchange? It's not about, I'm a client, I'm receiving things. How do I know what it means? Right? So if I'm a client and I'm getting something, I'm getting a medication request, I don't want to have to guess. Is this use? Is this prescribed? I need to know. The serving system, it knows, or it has the best chance of knowing because it is the source of the data.
But I think that's why you do a request versus a statement. A request is not necessarily a use, but it allows you to have what the patient is intended to be taking or what the patient is intended to be on. And then it becomes your responsibility as a client to maintain and curate your medication list through using that as a basis and double checking with the patient, reconciling it to say, when did you last take that?
If I'm being given a list, here's a patient, here's a list of medication requests. I need to somehow know, is this a list of uses? Is this already a curated list? Or is it just a list of prescribes?
Throw those semantics on top of FHIR. That's additional semantics.
Absolutely, we can. That's exactly, this is what
then we wouldn't do that.
AUCDI is talking about, saying, I want to talk about a list of use. How do I represent that in FHIR? Right? And it's reasonable to then say, the way to do that in FHIR is give this resource this way.
And so following on from Michael there, like, again, going back to these cases, I acknowledge that you don't want to put these potentially in JU court, but if we think about, it's all about that assertion, like go back to the definition of a AUCDI use. It's the assertion that this medication is currently being used. So the use case is current medication list. So a system, if they have a current medication list, can exchange that list using medication statement. Exchange of a snapshot. Again, there's a snapshot here. Something has actually happened in the system to create that snapshot, whether that's an automatic process, Gary, or an actual clinical process, then that's a process. Documenting a list as part of an admission to a hospital. Again, there's a process a clinical process that's gone through creating that current medication list on admission. Medication specialist referral, again, is a clinical process. Someone is actually curating that list. And finally, the medication review is the obvious one, again, curated.
So, sorry, just adding and sort of supporting Heath, just looking at the AUCDI use case, which is about providing a current medications list. How would we even support it with MedicationRequest? What kind of search capabilities we need to support? What kind of, I know that's not the purpose of it, but we are trying to sort of solve a AUCDI requirement, and I don't see where MedicationRequest fits into that picture. That's my point.
Someone else is in front of you. Is just to get clarification, isn't the list the output? All right, and it's actually what you'll be sharing is an active medication or an inactive medication, and how you display that is then a list. So I think what we're talking about, that's an endpoint, and that's then whatever you're doing. But from a messaging perspective, I'd package up each medication separately, because they're actually, a list is, well, from a clinical perspective, I want the individual medications. I don't want the list potentially being, I want to understand what each thing is and then collate them myself. All right, so I think this gets back to where it sits from a transaction perspective. That's what I'm trying to understand. What problem we're trying to solve here.
And I think Brett can probably confirm this, but my understanding is there's some systems out there that actually literally have a curated current medication list.
Mm-hmm.
So that list is actually in the system. That is actually a view in their system. And hence the data that sits behind that can be exchanged as a bundle of medication statements. Now, whether that was derived from a prescription or not, that's up to the system, but it's still a curated list.
Just got to agree with Heath. So, because I think effectively, whether they're medication statements or medication requests, they're single entries that exist because somebody's entered them, right? So whether they're in a list or not, I think we can say, is this a complete list of medications is another question, right? And that needs somebody to assess it and say, I can actually know that or not, right? It depends on what system, what context you're in. So I think, though, pretty much everyone would agree that if you're writing a prescription, you're creating a medication request. Okay, so, and that medication request has a life cycle of existence. It's written on a date. The date goes on the script. There's a whole bunch of extra information which we haven't even considered in any of these models that are needed to create a full script. Okay, so I think at best, if you're using medication request in this sort of context, it's a summary of a request, right? Which will be essentially an order that is partially understood because you don't have all the details of a full script. Okay, so it's kind of a different thing. So there will be two different medication request profiles at this point. So once electronic prescribing is in place, there will be one that needs to refer to this one as a summary. And I think medication statement, the difference really, I think for me, is that medication statement is considering aspects of the medication use that a medication request will never have, right? So it's and I think in US Core you can see them patching that by trying to cover some of those things by adding adherence resources and other things on the side. But I think even just looking at the roadmap for the medication use here, there's things like onset, which are like which is effectively the first time I use this medication, which is really kind of important as a context piece, saying I've been on statins for 10 years or, and this is super useful to know. And I think around the ceasing of medications, which is which is kind of only covered with endpoint, which I don't like in the model, but it's like, I think there's a short-term, long-term sort of concept, whereas this is a medication I'm on now and I expect it to end. And these are regular medications that I'm going to be on all the time, and the CDI models covers that, right, in some way, right? So I think medication requests don't do that. I mean, when you prescribe in a lot of GP systems, you do pick, is this a long-term or a short-term prescription, and that decides how it behaves on this current meds list. Because if you marked it as regular, it will stay on the current meds list, even though effectively the period of that request has ended. Whereas the short-term stuff will automatically go off the list. So that's really that's a list management selection to say how I'm going to manage my list. To his point, they're actually two separate things. So there's a past prescribing list, which has all the things I've ever written the script for, which are all the requests. And then there's this current meds list. And in some GP systems, they use that current meds list as a place to capture prescribed elsewhere and also self-prescribed stuff. So like patients on supplements or that kind of business where they're not
which I think is a bit of a warping of what it says in the narrative of medication request anyway. But it certainly is possible to do that. So, I mean, I'd be happy to say we should do both. And if your system understands medication statement, that would make sense. But I think it's fair to say a medication request kind of summary would be fine. But yeah, having said that, that will need to get reconciled later in electronic prescribing. So it all needs to make sense. And I can see why people think these are, I mean, there are essentially 8 out of 10 elements are the same, right? So it's not, there are just a few things that are more difficult to, or will be possible to do with medication requests. So I think it's, yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say I agree with that. I want to know if anyone disagrees with that, or if we can accept what Brett just talked about around how the resources work and how systems work. Because once we've got that kind of general agreement, we can move on to the next part.
Can you summarize in your own words what Brett said?
Less words than what was just said. That if I go through the whole summary, which was about what's happening in GP systems and how we have that difference with terms of prescribing between long-term and short-term. And
well, I think.
Hang on.
Yeah, I think we should split it into medication requests. We should support medication requests to record scripts that are written, requests that are reported to us as entries in systems, right? And if we say yes, we'll do that, that means we can represent those things. And then as item number 2, we may support medication statement when you want to state medication usage, which is effectively a current existing medication use, right?
Yeah. I think that's partly what Heather kind of summarized in the chat, that medication statements is a snapshot valid only for a limited amount of time around when you discuss that with the patient, confirm with the patient that they are taking it. Whereas medication requests are long-lived objects or resources that say you had a prescription for this medication.
I don't think we need to reassess medication statement because some systems have a standing medication statement.
Okay.
Some systems have a standing
medication statement. So effectively, the maintenance of your medications, you do medications management using prescribing and other entries, and that list is constantly there all the time, so it's available all the time.
List, correct.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think what we're looking at is the individual entries on that list.
Yeah, well, the individual entries are up to date at all times, so therefore you can query the system at any point, and that is the understanding of the current medications of that patient at that point. Right.
Sure.
So,
and I think I do want to bring it back to there is a element of what do systems currently support, because the only thing I've heard so far of actual implementations are requests basis and not necessarily statement basis for interoperability. So while
I just want to throw in there medication dispense summaries as well. So I agree with everything said there, but after working in ED for 12 years, I can definitely say that all the clinicians, from doctors to pharmacists to nurses, they often call pharmacies for dispense summaries. And I could say that dispense is one step closer to knowing that the patient's actually taking something. So yeah, medication request summary, medication dispense summary, reconciled, often leads to the best possible medication history, which is another term
so you're talking about as
history.
a ED practitioner being able to build that current view of that patient in front of you of what they are currently taking, and using the different aspects of dispense, statement, requests to build that current view. Yeah. And yes.
Well, this is a hot topic. Look, I'd just like to throw a couple of things into here. Some of the assertions that are being made are obviously based on an urban environment where you have a lot of information available. bear in mind, most of Australia doesn't have that. We have fragmented systems which have no way of collecting patient prescription information and creating a statement, because it's fragmented across maybe 10 different systems in the area, which are not interoperable, some of which don't even have connectivity. So we need to be able to consider that in our use case, not necessarily for the current one. I'm just telling you, in terms of our general guidelines, we need to be aware. Secondly, I wanted to say, and this is probably something I'd like Heather's input on, in the intent of the statement. So I would see the value of a statement as being a visible, current assessment of what medications are there, so that clinical risk will not take place by prescribing something that will do, like we had in the example of James' message today, cardiotoxicity if someone's on oncology drugs, all kinds of things like that need to be considered. So that's the value of a statement. The fact is, though, that to be meaningful, that has to record ambiguity. The ambiguity that someone has been prescribed something but may not have taken it. For 90% of the people who live up in the Cape who are prescribed something, even given the dispensed when they've been to ED in Cairns-based hospital, there's no way of knowing whether they've taken those drugs or not. And so the best you'll get is 3 months later whether the patient reports it or not. But that is still an important factor in their medical statement, I would think, as a non-clinician, and having talked to many, many clinicians and got their input from the rural and remote area, they would rather know there's ambiguity but know that, yes, that has been prescribed, rather than double prescribe something or give a dosage that's inappropriate or something. So I'd just like to give a bit of context around some wider things than just urban Australia.
Really quick, when everyone in the room's talking, there's just a request to introduce yourself to the line so everyone knows who's speaking.
Hi, Heather. It's Michael here. Which Michael? Michael Lawley. So I think we need to be careful in this discussion to always keep separate whether we're talking about request as a system internally thinks about things and talks about things, as Brett was discussing, versus medication request, the FHIR resource, as how we're going to represent that information when we exchange it. And similarly with statement, so that we know, because we are talking about exchange here, and what we're exchanging is the FHIR things with these special names, but they may be other things in the system, and they may be, you know, a request table that has use in, you know, columns in it and so forth. I don't think we're really talking about systems that are natively storing FHIR medication requests or FHIR medication statements that are then forced to be exchanged in that way. So medication request here, medication statement here as FHIR things are essentially views over what's in an underlying system.
Hello, it's Brett here. Yeah, I think the thing is to, like, we are thinking a lot about these things in request-heavy systems, okay? And there are other scenarios, I think, where a medication statement can be used, say in an aged care scenario or something like that, where you've got a meds chart and also just maybe administered things that are not usual as well. And being able to create a medication statement set is actually very helpful, because you can say, oh, this was actually administered and this was you know, in the regular meds chart as regular meds. So and presented as medication use today, right? And that's actually kind of nice if you want to do a transfer right now, right? And but in that way too, you can still refer to where you derive this statement from, which is helpful if you care, right? But it also doesn't like, because if I live in a world where it's all about dispensing, like a pharmacy system, I can't. How would I? Yes, I receive requests from somewhere else. I suppose I could say that, but my main business is dispensing, so I'll probably just say, "What did I dispense?" That's your medication use. So it's not AUCDI use. It's dispense. Yeah. Yeah, but like there's an implication of use, right? And this is the same with requests. Like a GP does not know what you use because they just write scripts, right? So they expect you are using that, and if you ask them what they was providing, which I kind of think backs up the use of medication request as its own thing, right? But I think it would be, I think maybe because to me, medication statement is what I can really expect a patient to be using, and if I'm on the prescribing side, I expect them to be using it. If I'm on the dispensing side, I expect them to be using it. When I gave it to them, I know they're using it. But there is this expectation, and I mean, if you're trying to take that patient into another context, you want to know what you can reasonably expect to be in their system, not what this, exactly what happened in every system, maybe, right? So I think having, just because it's a request, I want to know you've got a script for this, even though I don't know if you've taken it or not, right? Yeah.
But then that's
yeah. I don't think we are, and that's the thing. I don't think we are inherently. Right now, we are not saying if we pick medication or request, it is the mapping to the use statement. We are more focused on what do we put in R1, because that is what we need to exchange.
Can I just propose, like, just a point on that? So can we therefore propose, based on that statement, that as a technical design group, we therefore recognise that what we're saying is medication use statement in AUCDI is medication statement? Because we've just said we're not saying that it's medication request. So is that our point? Can we say that now and accept that? We've got one decision kind of made. Yes, as defined by AUCDI, can we all agree that medication statement FHIR resource is that corresponding FHIR resource? We're kind of getting to that. I think that's what I want to do. If we are, then I'm happy to motion that we can make that decision. Will someone second that? You see it, there's a forest of hands so quickly. And I'll hand over therefore to the chair to follow the rest of motion.
Just before, did you want to speak before that?
Yeah, I want to speak.
Please introduce yourself too. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Joshua from MediRecords. I believe AUCore should have medication requests or a medication statement. Just coming from my generation, I guess, when a doctor prescribes me medication and let's say it's a medication statement I'm doing, I don't know what medication I'm taking, if that makes sense. Like, a medication request is scripts, right? I believe GPs just love scripts in general. So I feel also a medication request is going to be more beneficial just overall. But yeah.
All right. So we've had a motion to that AU request, the AU medication statement is the one that we think most closely aligned with the medication use statement that AUCDI has. So we've had a motion, we've had a second. Anyone object to that? And online, if you object, you raise your hand. Anyone abstain from that? We've had one abstain. Okay, so I think the motion is.
That's true. Someone get them the attendance list.
All right, so I think that motion's carried then.
Okay. So we have. Yes, we have.
Okay, I have to hold my thought. Hang on.
We do have 5 minutes until the break. We can resume this topic after the break. We have some other things to cover. there's still the outstanding question of which resource will we actually use in R1 and do the profiling on, and will it be one, the other, both, etc. That I think we still need to discuss based on the different use cases we've heard from the ED, from North Queensland, and all these different things of, as we actually go to say implement these, how do we exchange these resources? How do we exchange these concepts? How do we reconcile these concepts into our systems? That we need to figure out based on that, which resource goes into R1 and how we use that. So Danielle?
Which, yes, I was going to say, I motion that we, because we've got the right people in the room and I think in right engagement, that we continue the medication discussion and go and get more decisions, exactly what you were saying.
So there's a motion to push Heath back later in the meeting.
He's procedure stuff, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
He already agreed to that.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that needs to be a full motion.
No, that's fine. If there are no objections, then that motion would pass. I know.
We have you all day until 5 p.m.
Yeah, but it's a point of business that if we're making changes to the agenda, that we should get that confirmation from the technical design group.
There's a motion on the floor to update the agenda to continue the medication discussion past the 2:45 break. Is there a second? There's a second.
Right.
All those opposed, and including those on the line, please raise your hand if you oppose to continuing the medication discussion after the break. Does anyone abstain?
Motion's carried.
We will continue that after the break. So I guess as we move into the break, begin thinking about what are we going to actually use for the exchange? Which profile resource do we actually want to exchange? What does that mean? And what does that mean to your system as you exchange that? What do you support? What concepts are you trying to support in your system, etc. So, all right. For those on the line, we will be taking a break from now until 2:45 Sydney time, so approximately 15 minutes, at which time we will resume. Thank you.
I also realized
it wasn't really an important.
This needs to be a point of procedure. I'm not the chair, so. See, we got a meeting organized. I've never seen you raise your hands. That was fast. So we got a meeting organized Friday night. Done. Yeah, it's all organized. Done. Got everyone there. All the seats. Yeah. What do you go back? Not till 5. Well, no, what we're doing is we're sitting on the side. We know the conversation. So I think as long as they can work we're having clear already saying, I well understand, even though we are well, we should, but but it is interesting because we could, I wasn't sure when you were supposed to say, we were trying to get some input. It's like So we made this statement about but now everyone in the state wants to do the same.
Well, and I just said, well, no, that doesn't mean anything. It's just we agree that medication is provided statement. We now need to figure out what do we actually want to do.
If they support these use cases,
Well, and that's not part of the
this is we just basically say AUCDI is saying use is for these use cases. We have now just said for these use cases we're using medication statements by providers, right?
No, I don't think so. Hold on.
So, you know,
Where's Zoom? How do I move this?
Oh, this it's actually
we have actually
no.
I don't use Macs.
Yeah, and I don't typically do wrong one. Hang on. So all we
now it
do.
tells me whatever information I can get.
If you command and tab.
Oh, nice.
So if you this command and then that one up there.
This one?
It's available depending on where the. No, not everything.
I'm just gonna.
So if you just bring.
Not every system.
Is that us?
Yeah.
All right. Can everyone on the call hear me? Just give me okay, we got some thumbs up. So you'll still be on your phone.
Yep.
For that. Great.
Okay, so thanks for coming back, even though I was the one who was back late. What we want to do now is, because the chocolate tarts are very good, so if you haven't had one of those little, yeah, I'd go and get one. So we had some great discussion before afternoon tea, and I think we're kind of landed that we're going to be looking at medication statement. Yeah, there is alternative to do medication request, but what we want to do is we want to come to some consensus of what we're going to do, and if we're choosing one, then we want to try and understand if we can get that through for release 1. If we're going to get it through for release 1, it means we've got a lot of work to do in a short period of time to make that a reality, and we're going to need your assistance. So we will need some volunteers to help kind of drive that thing through. Okay. So release 1 is, we got 4 weeks or thereabouts to get that done.
August.
No. Well, to get the what's in it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No, that's better. I thought we were going, we're going to release it.
No. To get it into release 1.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like about 4 to 6 weeks to get, if we decide one of these things is going in,
then we need 4 to 6 weeks. That's our time frames to have gotten to a solid position. What is that? Where are we? Cardinality, terminology, what are we supporting and exchanging, and also start testing it. That's what we need within 4 to 6 weeks. And we need this work group to do that work. It's not just going to be one person coming to you and going, oh, here's what it should be. Does everyone agree on it? We're going to need people to take action items, own them, come back to the group, and drive that through, and also put your hand up for testing it, because we need to test it. Oh, Shobin's already a pre-volunteer for regardless of whichever one we choose. That's great. Thanks, Shobin. But let's get on to the discussion and make some choices, define those action items, who's going to do them, when can we come back to them on our time frames? One or the other, or could it be both?
Oh.
We do that work, but we're going to have to be quite tough on how can we do that and really get people who will put their hand up to do it, or we won't be able to achieve it, I don't think.
So it's all down to how much can we get done in the time.
R1, there is an R2.
yes.
Yeah, so the comment was that there is an R2, so don't think if we don't get it into release 1, it's gone forever. It's something that we can do later as well.
So can it be in R1 if it's not explicitly in the R1 of AUCDI?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, so to recap where we ended before break, is that we did motion.
Can you hear us online? Let me know if you can hear me. Okay.
Okay, you guys can hear Andrew now? Yeah.
I can hear you now.
There's a thumbs up from Nick.
Okay, so to recap for those on the line, what we approved prior to the break was that the AUCDI medication use statement maps to the medication statement in FHIR. And what we need to look at now this afternoon is moving forward with R1, which resource do we want to begin with for our implementations. When we release our AU Core R1, which resource or resources will we have in there that we can get through? As Danielle mentioned, there's a lot of action items that we have to make happen prior to that. And R1 is not the end. There will be additional resources in R2. So there are the option to do medication request or medication statement or both. And what we need to look at today is which one do we want to pursue first? Is it more important for us to go with medication request first, or is it more important for us to go with medication statement first?
Can I make a request then? Can I make a, let's just do a simple vote initially. Hands up those who would be interested in doing the medication statement first. We got one hand. Are those online?
2 hands.
2 hands. Hands up those who would prefer to do the medication request first.
We're going to need the other people in the room who are TDG members to kind of weigh in on this because you don't have to be involved.
Yeah, so I think what.
Okay. So there is another thing that we defer medications to R2. How many people would support that? We would be thinking, you know, as an option. What about those online? Any thoughts online about that?
You mean deferring all medication
Just
stuff?
Thumbs up if you'd like to. Hang on. If you're talking, Richard.
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah. Do you mean you want to defer all medication stuff to R2? Medication statement, medication, and medication request?
Richard's question was, does that mean we want to defer everything to R2? That is the option that Marvin proposed. Can you give the phone? Be sure to introduce yourself for people on the phone.
Michael Wilson here. Just wondering if we need to talk first about the use cases we want to support and then look at the profiles to support those use cases.
I think use cases are something we could look at, but as a foundational implementation guide, it is not going to we are not going to put narrative or profiles on those use cases to start.
Which use cases do we see being supported for R1?
Yeah.
What resources do we need to support that use cases? So that would help us decide which one might be more important.
So between the 2 use cases, between the 2 resources, you're kind of saying, how do we cover use cases? Danielle?
Could I ask Michael you to clarify how you want us to do that? Are you saying that we should go around the room and everyone should say which use case they want? Because what we need to do is actually get somewhere and get to a decision here and a way to do that. And if we want to do that by use cases, noting that AU Core might support every single one of us having a different use case, right? Or multiple different use cases, because it is an abstract specification that should be across most use cases. Heath, you've got your hand up.
I've just got a suggestion on how we might be able to do it.
So my suggestion on how we could do that is those that put their hands up around wanting to implement one or the other, provide their use case for doing that.
Sounds great.
It was kind of along the lines of what I was suggesting to kind of, I think Andrew put it out there before the break, was along those lines as well. It's like go around the room and who implements stuff and why.
I like that. I think we should do a go around the room. I recognize we have 2 hands, 1 hand on the phone. So how about we go to Heather, and then we can go around the group to say what is our use case and what do we currently support.
Hi everyone. Just if we go with medication request, there's no input at the moment from CDG, and does it matter? If CDG does address it later and it's already gone through TDG and into core or base or wherever we're going, What are we going to do? So just putting it out there. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there, but just raising that as a potential issue.
I think at that point in time, it will need to be reviewed, and just similar to how we said medication use maps to medication statement, we'll need to do a similar approval to say that that's how those map, and then review the individual element mappings. So yes, there is a potential for conflict or those not aligning when if we go ahead with request and the CDG comes out with it later, we'll have to review that then. Richard, you have your hand up, and then we'll go around the room.
Okay. I like medication statement. I like it for things like a list of what we know about the medications the patient has taken and that sort of thing. So I think that's the sort of use case that I'm thinking of using medication statement for.
Okay, so if everyone in the room could hear, Richard's use case for his system is using medication statements to represent what a list of what the patient is currently taking. Just because it's on my left, Heath, do you want to start?
Okay. So we do have a representative here from MediRecords, so I'm going to put my MediRecords hat on, Josh. So MediRecords implements a medication request resource, and that's specifically for prescriptions, active prescriptions, history prescriptions.
Anybody else?
Okay,
Who else put there?
Just, I would say go clockwise, clockwise.
Hi, Sean Roy. I'm building a patient summary, kind of an IPS. And when I'm looking at the data that is available from the vendors, I can see mostly supported medication request, not medication statement. And medication request is basically the prescription medication. So for a summary, prescription medication I believe, is be more beneficial to start with. That's my use case.
Just real quickly, I want a medication statement, but I think pragmatically the issues around it will need some more resolution. In particular, whether we only include guaranteed medications that are being taken, or whether we have other things on the list, which I know is out of scope of this, so I'm not wanting to kick that off. So my support is more for the medication request to get us something.
Hi,
please, be sure to introduce yourself and no problem.
Joshua Zola here from MediRecords. As what Heath said, we've implemented medication requests. So we use it for active prescriptions, and it's one of our main features for patients to tell what medications have been prescribed to that patient. But yeah.
So we are looking more at the transfer of care scenarios where we get people coming in from, say, aged care places into the hospital. So you are expecting medication statements there as like a list of medications. So that's why.
Can you guys, to assist Dushi taking notes, just project as much as possible.
Dylan Fernandez, Health. So mostly we're looking at a inpatient, like people coming into the hospital as a transfer of care scenario. So we're expecting medication statements, and also for discharge summaries. When we're going to send them out to the My Health record, they expect medication statements. So, yeah.
If you were looking for a draft of the support page, because we don't really have anyone with medication statements, so that would be really helpful.
Hi, this is Shahzad. I'm from Western Sydney LHD. Coming from the public sector, we deal with inpatient, emergency patient, outpatient, community encounters, all. So we need both. And plus, we also deal with the reconciliation of the patient medication as well. So yeah, we have a quite complicated situation. So if we are planning, which we are actually planning at the moment to adopt FHIR, so yeah, we would need more.
So can I also make a suggestion? You say whether your system is a server or a client?
We actually spend, so we deal with both the situations. We provide services to the patients as a service industry. But then we also share the data with the Ministry of Health, with the with other departments of government, and plus also with eHealth. And we also receive the data from other systems as well. Like in case of pharmacy, we dispense the medication. We dispense the last discharged medications through iPharmacy, but actually we administrate the medications and we write the orders back in Cerner, which is the our HIS. So yeah, yeah, we have both.
I think Gillian is also both as well.
I was more thinking of it from an interop point of view, like my incoming and outgoing, as opposed to what I'm doing inside my system, because I don't think AUCDI doesn't have to be part of that. It can be, but it doesn't really have to be. So I'm just more thinking of the edges of the.
So just to, as he said, name, who you're representing, are you a client or server, both, and then if you're using request, statement, or what your use cases are.
Cool. Hi, it's Brett again. So this is all hearsay, but I know I know at least 3 forms-based referral style systems. So the Telstra Health Fast Forms. Well, it's not Telstra Health anymore, is it? You sold it, didn't you? You sold it. Clan Williams form system, and Consult Med, who's a inbound hospital referral system, and also My GPMP tool that's doing care plan management. All want current medications entries and are using medication statement, right? So to support that, they probably live with MedicationRequest if that was all that was there, but their intent is to know what is the normal medication for these patients. Yeah.
So there's a client.
As a client, these are all web-based client form.
How do you get those into Page?
Yeah, I will try and get the people that own those systems to put their details in there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone on this table here? Over here?
We'll come back to you, don't worry. Do you guys? No. Okay.
Thank you. Can I clarify that the medication resource type is definitely in scope?
No.
It's not definitely. Well, I put my...
Currently
Oh, okay. Because a lot of these we've been discussing rely on medication. So is it implicitly then considered part of the scope if those are in scope? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to put my hand up for the medication resource, independent of those others.
Hey, thank you,
Because
Ruben.
there has got to be a huge use case for that across the whole health system for representing AMT, PBS, MIMS, whatever you.
I agree that I think a lot of our conversation is currently based on the medication resource being in scope. Ruben, thank you for volunteering as an owner to take care of that. We look forward to hearing a lot more from you of reviewing the must supports and mandatory elements for that. So thank you.
Hi, Rachel Hayhurst from Solving Health. I don't have a system, but I have worked with GP data for the last 15 years. My understanding is that the cardiovascular disease risk calculator is a use case and that needs medicines. I think where I'm struggling with the two, and I don't mind which way you go, just transparently, but somewhere we need to find a way to get out of GP systems what that list is, but you can't make an assumption that that list is being taken by the patient, and that's the gap for me that I have a mental block with, because medication use suggests that the patient is taking it, but if your clinical system only has a script, then it's a script that's being given, no guarantee that that got dispensed or taken. So with those caveats, that's where I'm kind of sitting, but CVD risk calculator will need meds.
I'll go and share my system. I'm Andrew Aubrey. I work at Epic, and we do in Australia hospital-based systems. We currently support the MedicationRequest resource based on the US core and AUCDI requirements. When we do medication exchanges for either active medications, prescriptions, etc., we prefer to use the medication requests because, as Rachel alluded to, that represents what the patient is intended to take. And then the responsibility of reconciling that medication list falls on the consumer of that to say they have that patient in front of them. They are the ones actively reviewing, are they currently taking it? So from a initial R1 interoperability perspective, we do believe that medication request is better suited to start that. To use that to say, this is what the patient is intended to be taking. It is not making an assertion about at what point in time it has been confirmed that the patient is taking it. It is solely intent and allowing you to base that off of that. And then additionally, that is what US Core and USCDI was written around. US Core and USCDI do not have anything about statement currently. That has some other issues that need to be addressed, and statement seems like it would be better suited for R2 or in the future. That's, again, my position as a representative of EPIC, not the one presenting.
Let me scroll up on the page there because we don't have Michael here to represent Oracle. I don't know if anyone else can represent Oracle. But there is Oracle on that list. You've got EPIC on that list. So I thought there was, and best practice was also on that list. So that's service.
Does anyone on the phone want to share their system, use case, capabilities, etc.? All right, Heather?
I have no system, but I just want to make a comment. I was just trying to type into the chat, but it's easier to say it if there's a break. The notion that a medication use statement is actually truthful and that this is actually what the patient is taking implies there's been some kind of reconciliation process and that the patient has sat in front of you and told you, yes, I do take it every day. It doesn't mean it's the truth. So there's always this issue of what is real, what is in the list versus what is actually happening. And so I think conflating the use statement with the notion that this is the source of truth is problematic. It really is just a report of what we expect people to be taking. I don't think you can add in any more levels of authenticity or truth or whatever to it and load it with that. It is just a report and it should be just at a snapshot at a point in time. And I think it should be just kept that simple, if that makes sense, because I keep hearing allusions to this is what the patient's actually taking versus what's in a medication list. I think the use statement is just another way of basically reporting what's in the medication list for a different purpose. I don't know if anyone else has got any other feelings about it, but from a clinical point of view, there's never any guarantees.
Marvin?
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion then that given that the majority in the room wanted to look at medication request, that's the one that we focus on for release.
Sorry, can including those on the call, can you raise your hand if your capability, use statement, etc., is around medication statement?
No, you don't have systems. It's alluded to 3, and I've just asked the CBD risk guys, and they said medication statement. Sorry. Now, yeah, exactly. So I'll put mine down. You can keep yours up.
And so 3, 4, 4.
4, I think. Yours and Dylan's is the same place, and you can't
And
show your hand was up for
those for a request.
Okay.
Can you raise your hand?
2, 3, 4.
So you can't double it.
So 4.
Do we add anything for the ones that have recorded their vendor support in the page? Yeah.
I mean, we're going to add, like, I guess, in terms of looking at numbers, if we take what's in the room plus that, it does indicate that currently
there's more use, sorry, if we take what was just put hands up in the room and look at the draft vendor support page, it indicates that there is more current support around medication request. I think that was the purpose of us trying to understand what is the interest at the moment. But it's not like we only have one interest in one. So do we feel we need to talk more, or can we make a vote on what we want in R1? Oh, no, we've got hands up.
Don't talk for too long. Let's kind of get to some.
Yeah, I'm making a suggestion. So I think it seems medication request has more ready implementation capability. So I would say let's prioritize that as the first action. And then I think what we will find is there's a lot of reuse in the must support space in terms of how that would flow into a medication statement profile anyway. So you will probably find that there's a lot of ability to be able to say, well, a medication statement would behave in a similar manner on a lot of aspects, right? So I think that would probably give you the opportunity to look at R1 if you are through medication request and can make the decisions to really look at getting medication statement in R1 as well. And I would suggest do both.
So is that a motion to prioritize request? Is that recommendation? All right.
I have a question.
Mine was more of an observation, and again, I've derived this. I'm not sure if it's completely true, but I think the people that were after requests were servers, and people that wanted statement were clients, which is a problem.
I'm Michael Wilson here. Yeah, I agree with Heath there that we didn't add that to the use case scenarios to whether you're providing or requesting and the like. But also just making sure that we're comfortable that we don't have the AUCDI guidance for it. Like there seems to be more system maturity in medication request, as in it's already implemented. But are we comfortable with the risk that it may change, the guidance might change, where there's more maturity in AUCDI and medication statement? That's the question. That's an open question.
I think so, yes. We also have Richard with his hand up next. So Richard, I'm going to unmute you now. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay. My question is around if we choose one of medication request and medication statement to go first, people who are thinking in the other terms, how much are we going to encourage them to redescribe their business needs to be in terms of medication request, or are we going to encourage them to develop their own profiles of medication statement? Or are we going to be completely silent on that? I don't think we should be completely silent on it. I think there should be advice on what people who want medication statement and are planning to use medication statement should do if we decide to pursue medication request by itself, whether they should try to redefine their needs, or whether they should try to, or whether they should go it solo with their profiles of medication statement.
Sure, I think that's a valid question, and I think Danielle, myself, or Heath can answer this.
I've got a response to that as well as my original question. I mean, the IPA actually says regarding clients that they need to support both, whereas the servers only have to support one or the other. So I think if you're concerned about what you've just asked, I think there's probably a fairly simple future state that we could articulate to give them a little bit of guidance in the interim, maybe.
Yeah, I think the medication statement profile, while not in R1 and going through the same maturity level, would not just go away, right, Danielle? It would still be available.
So my other statement was that I think we're hearing also there's a lot of overlap between medication statement and medication request, and obviously that's implied by medication use. So if we keep our guidance around medication request in the context of medication use statement,
we might be okay.
Ruben?
I just wanted to make a comment about medication request, and that is, this is the same resource type that's used for medication orders for inpatients, as well as community prescriptions. So I just want us to go into this with our eyes open, that if we're putting it in AU Core, we may have to satisfy both cases with what we put forward, or potentially have different profiles for those different settings.
I think kind of, as we always kind of say at our meetings, it's the minimum set for everything. So making sure when we review the mandatory elements and must support that it is the base resource that can then be used in all those different things. So when we look at the medication request, or when we look at any resource, making sure we put our conditions, our bindings, our must supports as a light touch almost. Danielle?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's got to be abstract. If there are specific requirements for those, then we need a downstream IG really that it is about supporting that workflow. It's not AU Core's business to do that. It needs to be that very high level. How can I ask for things? What do I get back that is common across it? Sorry, Brett?
Yeah, just add to that. I think because we would expect if we did an e-script spec, it would have to be reconciled with this as well, because effectively this would be effectively like a summary of a script that is written, right? So because so we would expect them to be aligned entirely, I think. So, but in an e-script, you would need a lot more stuff, right, to actually make an e-script that was satisfactory to meet sort of prescribing requirements. Yeah.
Thank you, Brett. I'm just going to move to start wrapping this up, not an official movement, but we have 10 minutes left where we are going to move on to then Heath's presentation on procedure.
Because I also just want to go here. So there seems to be general interest, like medication statement, medication request. They're the two we really care about, right? And as Brett said, can't we do both? So, and if we do both, though, that is the effort and the resources to do it. Can we commit to that feasibility? I want to know what, I guess, that opinion in the room is, and are you going to put your hand up to work through that and do the testing on it for us to achieve it? If not, we do have to make the hard decisions so that we can get through.
And that goes back to just like Ruben volunteered to own medication. Are there individuals? Sorry, I'm just going to keep. You put your hand up. Are there individuals or owners who are interested in owning either of these resources and advocating for them in R1?
So you've mentioned this a couple of times around testing them. And so maybe you can explain what that means, as in the number of system vendors that need to actually implement it.
Okay, so by testing, we're really talking about going through and testing from a maturity model perspective. We've got some requirements on what we need to meet from a FHIR maturity model level. And what we're really looking for is, I think our minimum requirements here are 3 independently developed systems testing 80% of a particular resource profile, either through Connectathon, pilot testing, or some other form, which can be, for example, if they were clients, we could set up test scenarios off the Spark server and engage with people to confirm how that was going, or if they were servers, use the Inferno test suite to go through and test that, bring this to Connectathons, give and hold mini virtual Connectathons and going through and confirm it. But we do need a number of people to do it. I don't think 3 independently developed systems is enough, really.
So 3 on each side?
I think, yeah, 3 clients, 3 servers.
Including reference implementation?
Yeah.
And what can we publish one?
Yeah. So 3.
Something that didn't get through that maturity.
I would say that when we publish R1, what we want to have included other things that we can say are at a standard for trial use perspective, and some of that is going to be a judgment call from the technical design group to say, are we confident in this, in what is in there? And we might end up taking out resources, sometimes even through the ballot resolution process. There are some things that I don't think we could publish. We might have to delay if they aren't in there. For example, patient, AUCDI patient. We wouldn't publish R1 at all without that. I think that undermines the purpose of the specification, but we might end up moving out resources if we feel it's still valuable enough to publish a release 1 with the set of things that we're confident in that is usable, and then continue to work on and mature those things that didn't quite make it in R2. That's what we would be doing. And I think, Brett, you've got your hand up.
Brett, and then we'll cover Heather's comment in the chat. And then move to start wrapping this, make decisions, and then hand it over to Heath after that. Go ahead, Brett.
I would be happy to volunteer to draft a medication statement profile.
It exists.
It already exists. That was easy.
It's been
I'm going to volunteer to do the work that's already done.
but
sorry.
Yeah, I'm good. She's good. But yeah, so I think the question is like, obviously it would be a committee question about whether you could get it to a state that you think it's okay to go ahead with for testing, you know. But I think these are really, I honestly think these are pretty linked because there's a lot of overlap, I think, in what the content is. And so like once you're sort of looking at must support on drug terminology, medication resource, and those things, I think you'll find that you just keep those things in line, and you'll be pretty close to having 2 profiles that are active.
And I think that's what Heather is alluding to in her comments, that one is going to drive a lot more of the other. I'm going to give Danielle a comment and then ask the group a few questions and then go from there. Go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment on that. So here's what we need to do for either of the profiles we put in, right? We need to go through and confirm what our terminology requirements are and agree on those. We need to confirm what we think our minimum requirements are, including things like cardinality. What has to be mandatory, and what are those minimum elements that need to be supported? That's your must supports. Those are the things we have to commit to, and everyone who put their hand up or said that they have an interest in this resource needs to participate in that and go, yes, I agree that I will support that element, or yes, I agree that's mandatory. If we can't do that, then we won't achieve our requirements. I think that's what we have to do.
So
it's all on this page, so come and put your thoughts in here.
I would
For those
say
on the line, the page that's on the screen at the moment, make sure you head over there and add your requirements there, because that will help us.
As with all the vendor support profiles, please.
Yes.
I guess my 2 cents is I would suggest prioritizing medication request in R1, because that is partly what more people seem to have implemented. Can I make a motion? Oh, shut up, man. Okay, I motion to prioritize medication request in R1.
Okay, so the motion is to prioritize medication request in R1. Can someone second that? So Andrew has moved that. Can someone? So we've got a second. Michael. Anyone opposed to the idea? And those online, if you're opposed, so Richard's one opposed. Anyone else? Anyone? Oh, 2.
I was just wondering if there was some discussion and anyone wanted to put a counter motion.
Okay.
Yeah, so what's the motions on the table? We go from that stage. Is there any further discussion? Someone wants to add further comments or questions on that?
Okay.
A counter motion?
Yes, I think so, yes. Yeah.
So Richard and Heather both put their hand up for the negative side, I'm guessing.
We're assuming it's negative. If that is not the case, please put it in the chat.
I presume the motion is to prioritise medication request over medication
request,
statement.
not a medication statement, or are you having a second
So we'll do
motion about medication statement? So is it just
So which one we prioritize? Which one we do kind of do first?
I think it's fair. Absolutely. In my mind, we start with medication request, and we say that's the one in R1. And if we have time, based on how much we got through for the medication request and similar elements, etc., if we can include medication statement, sure. Then we make a motion at that point in time to say also include medication statement. But for now, it's by prioritizing medication request in R1, we're saying this is what we're going to focus on in our technical design groups. This is the resource that we're going to go through and look at the individual must supports, etc. There is a lot of overlap. Could that be a template for medication statement? Absolutely. But for now, it would be just medication request in R1.
Could we include in that as part of the narrative or guidance or introduction or boundary section or whatever with that, to indicate that that other resource profile is going to be coming, not a statement that this is all we're doing. So if you get R1, look at it, you don't see medication request, no statement, oh, that's what we use. So actually include something that just says this will be coming, covering blah, but not going into detail.
Danielle, is that let me amend my...
Yes, I think we have to do that. I think there's a placeholder section now in AU Core called Future of AU Core, and I think we need to elaborate if one of these gets left out about the use cases and about what that resource is. Yeah, I think we would have to include that.
Should I amend my motion to say that explicitly, or is that something?
Yeah, let's have a friendly amendment to say that we will agree to have that guidance.
I will rephrase my motion as I motion to prioritize medication request in R1, meaning medication request is explicitly in R1, medication statement is not currently in R1. And there is narrative guidance in the future of AU Core that medication statement is still under development and coming. And then as an aside, if we have more time in the R1 development timelines, we can use the knowledge we gain working through the medication request to inform the medication statement development.
Okay, can I have a second for that? Michael? We wanted to make sure he's happy with that, that amendment. All right, any abstaining? Any online who are abstaining? We've got 1 abstaining, 2, 3 abstains. Anyone who is against? Anyone online against? We've got 1 person against.
Hang on, is this
Thank you.
against
So
the modification?
the motion is carried.
Or...
Got through some stuff. Glad we were able to make some decisions. I also volunteer as an owner to help guide that conversation through the TDG and moving forward. So look forward to seeing you all on future meetings, and I'll give it over to Heath for procedure completed.
Yep. Sorry, Danielle here. I just also wanted to make a note then. So what we haven't done is gotten specifically, I guess, to the actions on this and owners beyond Ruben for AU Core medication.
And I'll do.
So, and Andrew's put his hand up for AU Core medication request. If there's anyone here who also wants to be a driver of what that looks like, if you can get in contact with Ruben for AU Core medication and Andrew for AU Core medication request, that would be great. What we're also going to do is come out with an email to people, especially those ones who we noticed you put your hand up, and ask, are you going to be happy to test this and get involved? Because we really do need that over the next 4 to 6 weeks to drive this forwards. And we'll also focus on action items for this, I think, in our next virtual, and just confirm this is where we are and confirm what our timeframes are for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are we okay to just move on? Okay. That was a pretty grueling session, so hopefully this is going to be easy, but Daniel always reminds me that nothing's easy. So here we go. Okay, so
We're talking about procedure completed from a AUCDI perspective. So this session, what I wanted to do is agree or get some agreed understanding of the AUCDI use cases. Not now, is that okay? Oh, that's only on my screen. Oh. Yeah, that's okay. Understanding the implications of using procedure in AU Core Release 1. And really just, again, to get a position on whether procedure is in scope of AU Core Release 1 as a result of understanding those implications and getting the agreed mappings of AUCDI elements to FHIR procedure and agreed must support procedure for a procedure element. So there's a fair bit there that I would like to get through. We'll see how we go. Again, we've got the authors of AUCDI in the room and online. If I misrepresent anything, please stand up and tell us that I'm full of it. So the concept of procedure completed is a procedure that is an intervention, intentional intervention, and to manage a health condition, to treat or etc. But the purpose is to record details about a procedure that has been performed or carried out. So again, I'm just really articulating what is documented in AUCDI, but in the considerations of use section, it's talking about a curated procedure or surgical history list or similar. So it's the significant procedures. And where it's misused, that not anything too much surprising here, shouldn't be used for vaccinations, shouldn't be used for problems and diagnoses, and shouldn't be used for things that are non-invasive procedures. So nothing too bad there. So in the discussion of the AUCDI, then we start having some points made. Details about single procedure event performed, which is kind of along the line, specifically designed to capture the activities performed, and with some extra text around that on an individual. And documenting a procedure is markedly differs from the requirements to capture details about a medical condition. So key point there is that procedures are different to recording problems and diagnoses, as medical condition being the synonym of that. And clinical systems currently use a generic data structure to record both completed procedures and manage the active and inactive problems or diagnoses. So that is current practice in some cases, in particular around medical history. And finally, a statement was made that the clinical systems will need to consider the shift towards the separate modelling patterns due to the difference in what is being captured about those two concepts. So I don't know if there's any commentary or comments or questions on any of that at this point. So this is really just trying to get an understanding on, making sure that we understand what AUCDI is articulating.
Just wanted to check, because I think
I have a question.
Can you clarify for the line that when you say currently use a generic data structure, I think what you're saying really is that they use the same generic data structure, whether it's completed procedures or active and inactive problems. Is that right?
I'm simply quoting what is in AUCDI. These are all direct quotes. I've highlighted some what I think are important words. What do I need to do that?
So Heather, if you can, we're going to unmute, and Heather, if you can comment on this.
So that's the button. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't hear Danielle on what she said. I've only heard Heath.
So just Daniel's asked if you could comment on the statement about the clinical systems currently use a generic data structure to record both the completed procedures and manage active and inactive problems or diagnosis. Dot point. The second to last dot point.
I can't recall how this was written in the document. So it's saying this is actually the only way that's happening, and it's not. But it goes back to our discussions, Heath, largely around the fact that some of these things just seem to get conflated together and use common structures to put into lists. And we're not getting clear differentiation between procedures and conditions, diagnoses, etc., which in the modelling that we're doing is going to be going in completely different directions. So we need to look at how we separate them.
So, and Brent might be able to comment on this as well, but my observation is that systems are, in their medical history area, are able to record a procedure that's been performed historically in the same area and with the same data fields as a condition that someone has or has had. And some of the fields that you'll see coming up are not being captured associated with that procedure. And the only way to distinguish between the two is through the code from a terminology. So if we're talking about SNOMED, it will come from the procedures hierarchy versus something that's coming from well, I'm going to use the word condition. I can't remember exactly what it is of finding. Sorry, finding? Yeah, clinical findings.
It's pretty. You'll have to mute me.
Which one should I mute it or not?
Yeah. That's good.
Like that?
Yep,
that's good. Excellent feedback.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like he said, that there's really only a terminological distinction, and it's also in some systems there's no indication of whether this is a reported procedure or a procedure that was performed. So whether this is a primary record of a procedure that was performed or it's a reported procedure that a patient or it came from another source that a procedure had occurred, which is kind of important, I think, in distinguishing some of this. Yeah.
There's no further conversation around that. So just a final point. The differentiation of the models is necessary because of the inherent differences in each of the data types. The problem diagnosis serves as evolving overview of an ongoing condition, whereas the procedure data represents a historical account of a past event.
Sorry
so again, that's just a
interrupting.
verbatim discussion item from the document.
Hello?
So based on that, are you able to disappear on that?
Sorry, one question. Richard, have you still got your hand up? We've got
yes, I have a question.
Whether or not you have your hand up or not.
I have a question, yeah. In that description of procedure, it excluded non-invasive procedures. I'm just wondering, so that would mean that an MRI or a CAT scan without contrast dye is not an invasive procedure, so it wouldn't show up as a procedure, but a CAT scan with a contrast dye is an invasive procedure. What counts as invasive for those purposes? Surgery? Are procedures like physiotherapy or psychotherapy not invasive for this definition? I'd just like some clarity around that.
Can we mark that? Because I'm not sure that it's relevant to this discussion.
Okay.
Maybe on AUCDI. Is that okay?
Okay.
Heather, did you want to quickly?
I was just going to respond to that. It's tricky, Richard, and there are some grey zones. There's no doubt about that. We don't need to record trivial things for the purposes of a surgical history, things like that. So it is something like an invasive imaging procedure with contrast, etc. Then potentially that is a procedure because it is operational. It is trying to look at sort of surgical operational things rather than, you know, is proctoscopy a procedure? Is psychotherapy a procedure? Not in the way clinicians think. It may be regarding how SNOMED groups things. And so it's trying to differentiate between the way procedure is applied to a whole lot of things. So I think there are examples in AUCDI of things that are absolutely not. And it's those kinds of things that are not sort of operational, that are not interventional, that are not sort of penetrating the skin or causing risk, etc., that are not significant. I think, you know, things like transport to a clinical visit is regarded as a procedure. If I remember rightly, Heath, if you've got it in front of you, you can record it. There are some weird things, and we don't want that kind of thing in this kind of surgical record. So, yeah, I'm not sure that that description is perfect, but it's trying to head in that direction, if that makes sense, Richard. Does that help everyone else kind of differentiate between what we're trying to do too? This is not one-to-one with what might be regarded as a procedure in SNOMED hierarchy.
That helps quite a lot. Maybe it could be just called surgical procedure.
Well, I think one of the, yeah, it's not necessarily just surgical either. So, yeah, it's tricky to get the wording right.
Thank you very much.
I think this is an AUCDI issue that perhaps we can move on to the rest.
Well, yeah, we would need a very clear value set defined, and it will affect AU base as well. Or
it's certainly going to affect terminology. So
yeah. It's also what do we do with the other stuff? Is a question.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and certainly my initial reading of AUCDI, I was concerned about collaborative care scenarios. But anyway.
I mean, one option is
I
that
tend to
our
agree.
system...
Sorry, it's Michael Drum. I tend to agree with what Heather's saying. But it also gets into a whole range of things: close reductions, ECT. You know, some places treat them as surgical procedures, other ones treat them as, you know, unclassified day procedures, and then, you know, the coders in the background work their magic to make sure someone gets an appropriate Medicare costing or whatever else out there. Are we going down a rabbit hole in regards to the fact that people don't have a consistent approach to the way they actually call procedures? Back to, you know, moving someone, and what are we trying to go back to what we talked before? What's the, you know, back to what Michael's statement is? What are we trying to communicate, and what's it going to be used for? Because if we're using surgical, it's, you know, then is it, you know, from a clinical perspective, it should be called out as a surgical procedure, not just a procedure.
I think from an AU core perspective, once again, we're probably agnostic to all of those. Yeah. And what AUCDI is probably doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, and I'll unmute just so that you can comment, is that the clinicians are being quite specific that they're, again, going back to that definition, they're looking at that surgical history, significant procedures, such as the surgical list. So whereas, you know, probably Brett and myself were thinking about things that are actually could include things that are non-surgical and non-invasive.
But then you use terms, significant, right?
Yeah.
This goes rural, significant in a rural environment, significant within a big major province. Right? That's not a consistent definition.
Right.
Thursday Island as significant is very different.
I presume that there's nothing wrong with us having things in AU Core that are supersets of what AUCDI comes up with. And therefore, whereas we want to know clearly what AUCDI want and intend to be the scope of what they are defining, that there may be other things that we use the same resource for and define in AU core quite validly as a superset of doing that. And I would suggest that's a way we can move on from this discussion.
I think that's probably about a really good summary of that. This is one use case, AUCDI is one use case, and then there's others. So, all right, so I'll move on if I can, because good discussion. And as I said, one of the goals was to actually get agreed understanding of the use cases of AUCDI so that we can move on. But the core thing, again, is that there is this distinct variation in the structure of procedure completed and that problem diagnosis structure. So for starters, there is the date performed of the procedure. There is also a clinical indication, which may or may not be a link back to a problem diagnosis. And on the other side, we've actually got a status of the problem and diagnosis. So I think that's my interpretation, at least, of those discussion items from AUCDI. So again, verbatim use cases, recording a procedure completed as part of a consult note or operation note, a procedure list, surgical history, procedure completed, and to exchange critical information about past operations or procedures with other healthcare providers. So interestingly, we've been talking about procedure lists and surgical, but then there's this first use case, which is actually talking about recording a procedure that was actually performed within a consultation, being an outpatient or primary care or even a hospital scenario. So there's certainly that that use case is also being suggested as part of AUCDI. And the last one is also interested in, again, that I guess this is the transfer of care or the patient summary scenario where we're curating that list of procedures and pulling out the ones that are deemed as critical for that particular communication. So I'll just pause a little bit and again, just is there anything else, I guess, that from an AU core perspective that is obvious that is not covered by those three that we want to consider at least today?
We want to do like we did last time, go around the room on whose systems are looking at this and what are they using it for?
Will that be the thing? See if anyone's got a hand up.
Constantly.
Does anyone have either online or in the room got any use cases that they are considering for this?
We're happy with those three, Brett?
Does that distinguish between a patient told me they had a stent put in 10 years ago versus I had a stent put in yesterday at the hospital and it came in a discharge summary?
Heather?
Reported things, but
I don't think the clinicians have any concern about that at this principal level, but I would be assuming that behind the scenes that the author of this would be carried, that the location will come eventually, those kinds of things, and that context will eventually be added. I don't think the clinicians need to document that this has been something that they've witnessed versus something that they've been sent versus something they've been told. You know, it's the same with any information. When you see a new patient, you don't record to that level of detail usually, and it wasn't something that came up at all with the clinician discussion.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, well, I'll move on. So looking at AUCDI data elements and how we map those to AU core. Basically, this is what was recorded in our wiki page, Confluence page some time ago. So we had procedure name, basically aligning with code quite nicely. So it's a mandatory single element of codable concept. We've got body site laterality. And of course, we've been on this journey for quite some time, and we have had a proposal that's been put forward that I think has been ratified.
Ratified on condition as an open proposal to apply that to procedure, but we've not ratified that yet.
Right. So there is a pattern that we're using.
Repeat that for the group, please.
So just to answer that on the proposal, so on the condition resource, there was a proposal that was ratified on how we deal with body site and laterality. There's an open proposal that we haven't yet discussed in the TDG to apply that same logic onto AU core procedure, which I think is what you've got basically kind of there, that's code. And that should be same guidance and same inclusion in AU core needs to have those examples and how to do that.
Yeah. So the Confluence page had body site as an alternative option and basically pending that pattern being developed. So really what we are talking about there is, and for very quickly, the idea is that the body site and laterality will be included as part of the code, either through terminology where possible, as a pre-coordinated term, as far as it can. So for example, it could have a body site as well as the procedure, but not the laterality. Or it could include laterality, or it could be just the procedure. But the text element would actually have all of that if it's captured by the system. So the full description will be in the text, and the coding would be recommended to be as far as you can, but effectively what was actually selected by the user in that within that terminology. So that means body site is not intended to be must support in AU core. Any comments before I move on to that? Any arguments against that? Let's come back to that. So clinical indication is reason code, but there is also an alternative around reason reference. Now, I've highlighted this as basically the highlighted bolds are basically indicating what we see as the must supports going forward. But reason reference was put as the alternative there, but given that AUCDI is talking about this being an optional multiple codable concept, then it seems reasonable that it is just reason code. Date performed, performed date time is our equivalent. But currently in AU core, we also allow period, string, age, and range. We can come back and have that debate later. And finally, we've got note. So Heather.
Thanks. Something that's becoming more apparent from a clinical point of view, especially with the e-requesting work, is the differentiation between clinical indication and the reason for something. So when I see the reason code, I guess I just want to try and raise that. The clinical indication is the clinical symptom, sign, or diagnosis that necessitates the procedure. And I think that's become quite clear, and I've never had that description defined quite so well. So I'm finding that helpful. And we're using that consistently across the e-requesting stuff and the clinical indication, for example, and medications. The reason for something, though, is actually always been a little bit twitchy, how we define it and what we intend by it. Becoming clearer, it is what is the clinical reason issue that something was done. All right, so the clinical indication may be a broken leg, but the reason might be to, it might not be a full fix of the procedure. It might be just to reduce the fracture, and they've got to do something else later, for example. So it's, the clinical symptom sign or diagnosis is what it is, but the reason is a clinical reason why you did this particular procedure or this portion of a procedure, or in the case of the requesting, the clinical indication might be a swollen leg, but the reason for doing an ultrasound is to actually exclude a DVT. All right, so related, but quite clearly, the symptom is there for the clinical indication, and the reason is to exclude DVT. It may be, in a case of a procedure, it might be to exclude a cancer or something like that. And it might be just a symptom of abdominal pain or something as the clinical indication. So when I see reason code, I just want to raise that maybe we haven't got our code sets actually aligned with that kind of thing at the moment, and we need to think about it.
I think in some places we've got something like a clinical indication as well as a reason code, but not in this particular resource from memory.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, so this is the only data element we have. So I think your point is noted, and we will certainly need to look at it going forward. And what I'm hearing from you is more of a terminology issue, perhaps.
Yeah, but we haven't been clear on our definitions or how clinicians need to, how clinicians differentiate it. And I think with this e-requesting work, it's become a lot clearer, and we should try and make sure that gets reflected back into AUCDI if we need to. But this is something that we will be using as a common pattern going forward, and finding examples to support each of these ones will be important. So eventually we may well have a reason for procedure, and I think a lot of models at the moment probably conflate clinical indication and reason, and I think we can actually separate them out. But you know, that for this model is a future thing.
I have some concern, to be honest, now, because if we actually map clinical indication to reason code and it becomes a different meaning in the future, that might be problematic. But the other comment that I've got is that I don't think that systems differentiate between the two either. I think they've just got one field, and it really is up to the clinician to fill out one however they feel like it.
Yeah, and that's where we need to start giving some guidance and being quite clear about the difference. It's the same with clinical indication and reason for encounter, or medications and so on. And that's where we are starting to get some confusion. But I'm just concerned that I think clinical indication is well defined there, but I don't know offhand what's in reason code. And I guess that's what I'm just flagging, that might be an issue.
Yeah, I think we can, yeah, you comment, Danielle, but I think we can.
Yeah, I was just, sorry. No, just let me know when to go.
Go.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So yeah, Danielle here. Yeah. Look, FHIR's got a grosser level bucket. Basically, you can put something in there that is the clinical indication or the reason that was performed. Both of those fit within the definition of what that element is for. It's just a broader bucket, and I think we'd address that through terminology, basically, as to what this is. And I'll just hand over to Brett, who has his hand up.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and there's this assumption that it's going to be code, but I think if you actually did use reference, you could have an observation or a condition or whatever you wanted on the other side of that, which is very explicit, you know, much more probably detailed as well. So I think there's some choices there as well.
Okay, so I think this is you hand up, someone?
Yeah. I just wanted to let everyone know that US Core only has reason code as well. And interestingly enough, the example value set bound to it are all the SNOMED codes that are clinical findings or procedures.
Richard, you've got your hand up.
I was thinking that Heather's description of reason code is almost like a sort of goal.
Sorry, start again.
Sorry, start again, Richard. We didn't unmute you here.
Two
Okay. Right. It strikes me that Heather's understanding of reason as opposed to clinical indication is closer to an intermediate goal rather than a trigger. So it seems that clinical indication, as she described, is sort of like what's the trigger for doing this? And that reason, as she described it, is something like an intermediate goal. And so they do seem to be quite different concepts. That's all.
So maybe this is one that needs a little bit more work through the TDG process, or maybe R2 or something. Yeah. Yeah.
If you rely on your terminology services, you could distinguish which value set they belong to.
Go.
I was just going to say you could rely on your terminological services to distinguish between the different value sets they belong in, right? If you cared. But again, this is, I think, an underlying FHIR modelling question, and I think it does reflect what Heath said earlier, is that I'm not sure systems make that distinction in having an element. Yeah, that's different. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So in summary, this is our current AU core procedure profile with the must supports. And so I've articulated there what the mappings are from AUCDI, so code, performed, reason code, and note. And just noting again that body site is not intended to be used in this particular scenario. I think I know that body site has been removed from some other profiles, so I'm assuming this has just been left over to be worked on going forward. So that will be, I guess, a change request coming forward for AU core procedure. Again, just a reminder to those people out there implementing procedure, could you please fill out the vendor support page? At the moment, it is very underwhelmingly filled out. I think there is only one vendor that might have filled that out. It has only just been published, so though I think only a few days ago. So as part of this event over the next couple of days, it would be great to know what your support is. So again, what we're interested in here is what fields or elements you support, what codes you're using, and what types that you're using around things like recorder and asserter, etc. Including whether you just got something like a free text reason code, for example. So it's not always terminology. In fact, most of the systems I've seen don't have terminology. It is just text. So that would be very helpful for us going forward to actually work out AU core procedure going forward. What are the other IGs support? And as Ruben indicated, there is no reason code in IPS or US core. There's only those 4 items that are supported: a status, a code, a subject, and when it was performed. So again, that comparison against our current, the US core against our US one, it's only those few items on this list.
Sorry, Danielle here, and I wanted to comment on why it looks different. So here, obviously, this for US core has way more must supports. That's version 6.
No, so this, sorry, just to clarify, this is
Oh, this is AU core. Okay, cool.
With US core overlaid.
Yeah, because I know at one point they took them out in an earlier version of US core, I think had those as must support, but they're now being treated as additional AUCDI elements. So they're in there, but they don't have must support on them. And that's both code and reference.
Yeah. So US core around performed has date time as must support. So it still includes date, period, string, age, and range, but it's indicated that you must support date time. So you can support the others, but you must support date time. So what do we want? So we've got status reason. Anyone that really wants status reason? Any hands up on the virtual as well? So I'm seeing nothing. So, well, we could treat this as a straw man and then take away and motion it later. But
yeah, sure. I mean, it is a straw man now. Yeah, but all right. I wanted to say that.
About the ballot. Oh, sorry, I was just asking. Does this affect the balloted version or just the version after that?
No, this will be. I guess what I'm trying to get a sense of today, of what changes we'll put forward for the TDG to ratify in the coming weeks before it goes to comment. Sorry.
This is the TDG.
Exactly.
So we're already in it. We can make decisions.
So, I mean, that's just basically for reason for cancelling it or not doing it, right? So I don't think that's a thing in the AUCDI at the moment.
All good reasons.
Yeah.
So you're motioning?
Motion to remove must support.
So there is a motion on the floor to remove must support for status reason by Andrew. Anyone seconding? Danielle has seconded. Any questioning on that? Any commentary? All right, any abstaining? Any negative or against? Online, raise your hand if you are against that.
Sorry, a question. If a procedure is cancelled, then so we have to provide cancellation with the status reason for that.
Okay, we've got one abstain. One abstain.
As a client, probably has more implications, but certainly from a server, we're basically saying it's up to you. If you capture it, fine. If you want to actually provide it, fine. But as a client, you're not obligated to do anything with it.
Okay, so it looks like the motion's carried.
Cool. So category. You go through the same process. Is there any reason why we should retain it as must support? Any person wants it. Okay, so I'll motion it this time that we remove category.
So Heath has motioned that we remove must support from category in AU core procedure. I think Andrew seconded that.
Michael, you've got no problems with that? Right? I'm thinking that you might have. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the closer Michael. The Michael with the system.
So Dylan, you've got a comment.
Didn't have a binding. So is there like any is that just completely open?
No, it has one in fire suite. Yeah.
I think the thing important to reiterate, we're removing
The important thing to reiterate when we're removing must support from elements is we're effectively saying, we're not saying you can't use this. We're not saying it's not available. What we are saying is that we are not commenting on the capabilities of the systems to guarantee the usage of that. So as a server, by removing must support, I do not have to worry about being capable of providing a category. Now, there are elements that I know as a server that I'm going to populate because we capture it, etc. But by removing the must support, there is no requirements on me as a server, as a client, etc., to do conformance, to say, show that capability, to populate it, etc.
I was going to say that. The other giveaway is the binding is an example binding, I think, for category. If you actually go to the snapshot. So yeah, all of those ones that have an example binding are candidates for removal straight away.
Okay, so category. So the motion has been put forward and seconded for category to remove must support. Any abstaining from that vote? Those online, raise your hand if you want to abstain. No abstain. Anyone against that motion? Likewise, do the same. So I think that motion's carried. Thank you.
Okay, recorder. Same deal. Is there any requirement, anyone in the room that has a requirement for this to be must support? Okay, so I shall motion that we remove recorder.
So there's a motion on the floor to remove must support from recorder. Heather, you've got a comment or
I've got a question. Does that mean we're not recording who the author of the procedure is, that we're not saying who's actually documented it? Isn't that a universal requirement for any bit of data to record who actually put it in the system?
It's not a must. We're not stopping systems from doing so.
Yeah. So am I confusing that this is an exchange format rather than an electronic health record document format? I would have thought that's pretty mandatory for any system to record who recorded it and who put it in the system. So maybe it's out of context.
But I mean, yep, good to go.
Oh, it's just where, thank you. It's where the metadata leaks into the data, right? So this is something that the FHIR resource authors have decided is important enough that you would want to maybe exchange it. And so I would expect every system to keep a medico-legal record of who authored everything that they did, right? But that's up to the system to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm just trying to differentiate. I would assume it's captured in the systems, but it's not necessary for exchange, no.
Yeah, I think that's what Brett's saying. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. For information like recorder and assister, I think those should be consistent across all the resources. For an example, condition, allergies, procedure where there's a chance of recording.
The consistency is that we've taken it out.
So are we taking it out for all other resources as well? Must support. Yep.
Not consistent.
Not consistent.
No, I agree for consistency's sake that if we're removing it, we should definitely look at recorder and asserter and removing must support for all of them. Unless there are specific resources that we say, yes, the recorder is very important to exchange. Therefore, it should be must support. And I think Heath was saying that. Well, wait.
Hold on. But before you.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, like, if you really care about recording who changed a bit of data, you don't record it as a part of the data. You record it as an auditable metadata record against the change and never on the data itself. The data itself may be versioned, it may be tied to that, but you would never put it in the data. For example, what if this was updated twice? first recorder changes, second recorder changes, you won't know what they've changed. So it's the wrong place for this data.
So just announce yourself. It's Chris, wasn't it? Yeah. You're right, Brett? No more comment? Okay. So I'll motion again to remove recorder.
So Heath has motioned, Chris has seconded. Any abstaining from this vote? Indicate online as well. Anyone against the motion? None against. That motion is carried.
Okay, asserter. Let's go again.
So there is a motion on the floor to remove must support from asserter in AUCOR procedure by Andrew. Anyone want to second that? Brett has seconded. Question.
So it can be the patient that asserts that they had that procedure.
Okay, any abstaining from that vote? Any online? No abstaining. Anyone against removing must support from the asserter element? No, the motion's carried.
Wrong button. Okay, reason reference. So my rationale here is based on that mapping from AUCDI. AUCDI is articulating they want a codable concept, not linking necessarily to a existing condition or an observation or another procedure or a document reference. So my position is that this is not something that is commonly supported in the systems currently and makes things quite difficult to implement. Too much choice and shouldn't be must support.
Danielle here. So I have a couple of things on that. So US Core treats them both the same. And my concern here is, I think that's a FHIR path question, like condition.code is the same as reason code to a degree once you've linked that. I think it is still a coded concept, but I think that comes through in the FHIR path. And I think what I really have a concern is the minimum must supports here is if we only do one and we don't have must support on reason reference, I guess I'm really concerned about only supporting one flavour of this. So even if you have a reason reference and you want to send that, what the implication of this would be saying is you also have to fill out reason code. You'd have to do both. No, I know, but you'd have to, or you would never be able to send reason reference. So my concern is that we're actually preventing that. And since AUCOR is, yes, it has to be an exchange standard for AUCDI, but I think it has downstream impacts that are unintentional by only putting must support on reason code.
So if I understand you correctly, if a system actually has a true link to an existing condition, such as diabetes or something like that, then they would be forced to put diabetes in as the reason code, as well as providing the reason reference. And that was my other question. So US Core, are they using R5 or R4?
Like they allow either. They allow for either. They don't
Is that more recent because it's not on our comparison?
Yeah, so what's on our comparison only shows the must supports in US Core. Okay. US Core treats both of them as ways to send the additional US CDI element. You can have one or the other, but neither of them are must support.
That's neither must support having one requiring
Yes, so that's a real danger. I
Yeah.
have one support here is we actually block downstream use to the other. So I think again.
So I think kind of based on what Danielle's saying and recognizing that reason reference and the fact that the underlying condition can have that codable concept, both will, for practical purposes, have that codable concept. I would motion to remove must support from both and match US core to allow downstream IGs to figure it out.
So I guess this is a two-part question. One is, in that use case where you've got actual condition but you don't have a code, I thought that was the example. We've got a reason reference, but we don't have a reason code.
Yeah, the use case is I have a use case to use a referred thing.
Yes.
I might have both, but in my use case, it's much more meaningful for me to actually be linking to a reference. So it's a downstream use case.
So if you have both, you just apply both, even if one is must.
No, you can do both. It's not a choice type. It's both.
Oh, it's not a choice.
It's not a choice type.
It
just looks like.
Yeah. So yeah.
It just looks like.
Yeah. So the other part is if you have just the reference, but not the code, and only the code is must support, are you then forced to put a code? And why? Because can't we say for this, must support means that you can have one or the other?
If you have reason information in your system, you must supply it in the element we've tagged as must support. So if you have condition code and you want to put that on reason reference, I would argue that the way that must support works, if you think that's coded reason information, that needs to be in the must support element. That should be how, that's what that means.
Don't we get to decide what must support means on a case-by-case basis?
No. No, we don't. And if we did, then what we would be saying is reason code is must support, but only some of the time. Some of the time you can use reason reference. You don't have to send the code is what you're proposing, which is, I think, let's treat them both the same way. You send what you have and what's relevant to you is the motion that kind of Andrew was going to.
Looking ahead at R5 and the code.
The microphone matching.
So you can just put must support on that.
Which would be the same as we
So I'm thinking from a client's perspective. If a server has an internal link to a condition, I would actually like the idea of being able to have that converted into a reason code, because that way I only have one place to go and look. Otherwise, again, the client's always the one at harm here as far as having to support two ways of doing things. So I still motion that we remove reason reference based on that.
Hi, Daniel Folks here. Just wanted to basically confirm what Danielle was suggesting, and also thinking in terms of we're getting hung up on condition here, but an observation is quite a likely scenario. So someone presents with a broken limb, a collarbone that's close to the shoulder and requires surgery. That will be recorded likely in an observation, and it won't be easy to capture that in a single code. So having the reference back to that, I think, is really important, because that comes more down to the clinical reason for why the procedure has taken place.
So I think we're using the term example of condition, but I don't see any difference between that with observation as well. We can still use the observation code as in the reason code, and you can carry the observation as well in the reason reference to get that additional context. But at least the client can, at a minimum, present the reason for this procedure.
Well, even if it's text, right?
On the line.
Richard?
Unmuted? Okay. It strikes me that, yeah, agreeing with Danielle, for a server of information, if we drop must support on one of the pair, it makes quite a lot of work for a certain class of server. While it's really nice for a certain class of client to have everything show up in reason code. So I like the idea of dropping both these must supports and saying that must support on this is something that shows up further down.
Thanks, Richard. My only concern is that it's a AUCDI requirement. Okay, so my motion still stands. I don't know if there's a seconder, but or more discussion, whatever.
Yeah, I was just thinking whether or not I wanted to just see how that motion played out or discuss that further. And I was considering whether or not your original concern piece on can we make the decision now. I think this one suggests to me that we might want to defer this one and do some prep to the wider TDG.
Yeah, if there's no seconder, let's move on. Okay. Now I'll come back to performed, and in particular around date time, and specifically looking to make date time as must support and questioning whether we want or the others at all. I would be quite happy to retain the others, but my preference would be to perhaps clean it up totally. But if I'm seeing shakes of the head, open to discussion before I make a motion. Andrew? And retain the rest? Yeah, so must support on date time, not removing the others, which is what US Core has done.
So just confirming that. So we're just removing date time from the list?
No, we're making date time must support. So we're adding an extra compliance to effectively move the must support from performed to must support on date time.
So practically, what does that mean? So say if I have a date time period recorded in my system. So I have a period. So I have a period recorded in my system, and that's what I want to put on the wire. Am I still compliant?
I have one comment on that quickly. So it's not all periods actually map to a date time, that you can be quite vague and have durations or other things in there. So I think you...
What's that?
Yep.
In that case, for that procedure, if you had a period instead of a date time, that individual instance, by virtue of a cardinality of one to many, you would include the period. You'd put a missing data. I'm looking at Danielle. You'd put a missing data on the date time, but must support just means you're capable elsewhere or for other.
Sorry, I've covered the cardinality. It's 1-to-1.
Date time.
Performed, yeah.
So you put a missing data.
So you're actually saying provide no information.
As with any element that is must support a cardinality one, if you don't have it, you are supposed to do missing data.
So as with any element that has a cardinality of at least one, this must, if you don't have it.
Data type, not element, different rules. We would have to be clear on what that is. And that's.
So are you ready to defer this one too? Because it's becoming.
Because I'm quite supportive of doing what you've suggested, but yes, we don't currently have we don't have the what does that obligation mean yet defined in AUCDI, because we don't have, this would be the first instance of us saying of the set of data types. Outside though, actually I lie, we do have it because we get it from the things like body height, which have value quantity as must support, but it's fixed actually to that. You can't send something else. Whereas if we left these in, we do have to say what that means. I would suggest, therefore, that we actually go look, since we're saying US Core's done this, we go look at what US Core says that means and whether or not, what must support of one of the data types means. And see whether or not that is actually something that we want to adopt. So I think we have to do that hand in hand, both the proposal to support date time and look at what does that mean then from an obligation sense all at once.
Okay, so it sounds like a good reason to defer.
I just want to say that we are 10 minutes out. So we've got one more? Okay, cool.
Okay, and I guess my final suggestion is how many of these codes do we need to support? And the one person who has responded, I believe, only supports 2. I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, because I think it might have been you, completed and entered an error. So some of those others, to me, make it quite confusing what they actually mean in this context. But from I guess I would be happy for it to be extensible, but I would like to limit this list down to something useful. And again, we can roll this over, but it would be interesting to have some discussion around this particular topic. Having these very long lists of things where it's probably not actually makes a lot of sense in some of the existing systems, for me, is leaving things quite loose and up for. You wouldn't?
No,
all right, okay.
Similar to having removed the active fixed on patient, we've got other use cases.
So it's not just the AUCDI one. With the way AU4 works, it goes across all downstream use cases, and some of those will have use for them.
So finally, is procedure and scope of AU Core. And given that we've made such good progress today, I would probably say it is. I would make that motion. That procedure is part of R1.
So the motion is to include procedure in release 1. Motion by Heath. Anyone want to second that? Brett has seconded that. Anyone abstaining? Either in the room or online? I don't see anybody. Anybody against that motion? No? Then the motion's carried.
Who owns it? Me?
After the break, can we, which is just more of a question in general, not a, no, you don't need to go on the question, it's just a break.
And are we doing a break or
No, we're
done.
We're done.
Finishing at 4:30 today.
Yeah, it is, and it's 5 to 5. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
it's 5 o'clock.
Sorry, everyone, I'm going to make a stay like another hour.
All right.
I think there was a, sorry, Andrew, just.
I guess while we still have time and are doing the problem stuff, do we want to look at the must support around body site?
I don't think we officially voted on that. So
I'd like to. Can we do body site?
Yeah.
I would like to just kind of say.
So Andrew motion.
Well, I was going to say why, but sure. I motion to remove body site from must support on procedure.
So, oh yeah, that's good.
And I'm
So
happy to
so the motion is to remove body site from procedure? Must support, sorry, must support. Move must.
And add guidance on how to do body site.
All right, let me just back up and make sure I repeat this properly.
So based on the AUCDI stuff saying that coding terminology is enough for the body site, so I motion to, this is Andrew, I motion to remove body site from, I motion to remove must support from body site on procedure and add guidance similar to how we've done for other resources on how to do a coded body site.
Okay, so that's motion by Andrew. Michael has seconded. Anybody want to abstain from that? Either in the room or online? We have one abstaining in the room. Anybody against? Either here or online? No? So the motion's carried.
So just, are there any action items, like what, just out of that, next steps, have we done everything we need to do?
There will be an action item, I think, that has to come out of that one, like there was for condition. So is it off mute?
I guess there was actually the round performed, date, time, and reason reference. So they're the two outstanding next steps. So,
yes. Yeah. So we need to have actions to bring a proposal to the technical design group for reason reference for date, time. Are you happy to take those items, Heath? And do you want to bring them to the next virtual TDG? Okay, great. We'll get you to email those out beforehand for the TDG. And we also will therefore have an action to, since we've just moved to add guidance to AU Core, like we did for condition, and Brett's got that action. Who's happy to take the action to put together the guidance we want to add around how to deal with body site information on procedure?
Is that going to be generic guidance?
Sort of, but it still needs examples.
Okay.
I'm happy to take that on.
Okay, so yeah, you'll take that, Brett. When can we get that information? Will you be able to bring that to the next virtual in 2 weeks? All right, we'll go for that then, and we'll bring that back to the TDG to go, here's the proposed guidance to be added.
So that's 3 action items?
Yes, 2 on you, 1 on Brett.
Did you get that, Dish?
All right.
Okay, cool. The next virtual TDG will be on the 4th of April, in a couple of weeks' time. Agenda will be put up online on Confluence closer to the day, but that's good. I think people are heading down to, where is it, the Ridges?
The cidery, Ridges, come socialise.
The site. Sorry, could you repeat that? No, they don't need it online. but I didn't know that everybody heard that.
The bar in Ridges will square, and it's called cidery. We're just all heading down that way.
Okay.
Whatever way it is.
All right. Thank you very much for all those who joined online and per lasting this session. I know it's hard work when you're doing this online and remotely. So thank you very much, and we will end the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.